What's up, guys? This is a stick figure historian, and today we're going to talk more about Scotland. In our episode a few weeks ago, I told the story of the Black Douglas capturing Castle Roxburgh. And now, I shall tell you of Edinburgh Castle. This stronghold was even more impressive than Roxburgh, and to this day it still stands upon its great pedestal of shale above the sprawling city. Though the castle that stands there today has been very much repaired and rebuilt, so that now it looks rather different than it did in those long ago days. It is said that the great rock beneath it was actually once an active volcano, and that the hot lava cooled within, plugging it up and so creating a sort of cone-shaped mountain. Though whether this is true or not, I don't know, because it's kind of based upon evolutionary theory, and this is all supposed to have happened zillions of years ago, so take it for what it's worth. It could have just been a mountain that had been there before. We don't really know for sure. Anyway, to take this castle, one must come up by the road that led to the gates, or else try to scale the treacherous cliffs. It was neither Douglas nor Bruce who had the honor of taking this castle, but rather Thomas Randolph, the Scottish king's own nephew. You may remember I spoke of him back in episode 14. After the horrible Battle of Methven, he had been taken prisoner by the English, and forced to swear his fealty to Edward, or else face prison or death. Well, it just so happens that a few years afterward, a band of English soldiers in the Scottish lowlands were ambushed and attacked by the Black Douglas. Of course, Douglas claimed the victory and the spoils, but among those prisoners which he took was none other than young Thomas Randolph. The king's nephew was not very pleased at being captured, however. It seems that he had grown to like his life in England, for King Edward had given him many lands, and he had grown much more wealthy as a subject of the English king than as a Scottish rebel alongside his uncle. When Bruce asked Randolph to come to their side and fight for Scotland again, Randolph refused. A short time in prison changed the young man's mind, however, and at the last he pledged his sword for his native land, once and for all. So great a fighter and commander was Randolph, that Bruce actually appointed him joint lieutenant of his army alongside the Black Douglas. The two men were nearly the same age, and it is often said that because of this, their past history, and joint command, that a bit of jealousy was bred, so that each of the two lieutenants often tried to outdo the other in magnificent military feats. And thus, you see, we come again to the castle of Edinburgh. It was March of 1314 when Thomas set out to take the castle, only a month after the Black Douglas had scaled the walls of Roxburgh, and he was determined to also earn his own mark of glory in this year's campaign. As happy chance would have it, there was a bright fellow in the Scottish army, William Francis by name, who was the son of a man who had once been the governor of Edinburgh Castle. In the years when his father had been governor, William had at that time a lover in the town, whom he often had slipped out to see. But, being a soldier and all, such visits would have been frowned upon, so William had to be very careful to keep them secret. So motivated was the young man that he would let himself down the castle wall and pick his way down the 260 feet of cliffside to the town below. He kept careful note of this passage, and so often had he stole up and down the cliffs that the way was forever ingrained within his memory. Now, as to if William ever went on to marry his lady love, I'm not sure. I mean, I kinda hope he did, after all that. It would really make for a romantic ending, too. But whatever the case, William's knowledge of the cliffs of Edinburgh was to prove most useful to Thomas Randolph and the cause of Scottish independence. William offered to personally lead Randolph and 12 of his men up his secret approach on the night of March 14th. You can imagine the trial which those brave men endured. To miss a step or lose a grip was to plummet to their deaths. To strike loose a stone was to alert their enemies on the walls above, and so ruin all chance of life and victory. And all this with the littlest of light to guide them along the way. They must trust entirely to the memory of William and his love-inspired forays. Erstwhile, the rest of Randolph's army charged up the road toward the castle gates, making as if they were fools and would take the place by storm. But it was only a distraction, of course, and a very useful one at that, for who among the garrison would think to watch the cliffs when so much commotion was going on at the fore? And thus, with this distraction aiding as a cover, eventually Randolph, his men, and their trusty guide heaved themselves over the crest of Castle Edinburgh's walls. And just as the Douglas had done at Roxburgh, they fought their way fiercely to the portcullis. The moment the iron bars lifted, the defeat of the English was sealed, and one of Scotland's greatest castles could again be said to rest in proper hands. Thomas had gained his glory, though we must say that the brave William Francis is also entitled to an equal share. All the time that these great adventures at Roxburgh and Edinburgh had been afoot, Edward, King Robert's brother, not the Edward of England, had been laying siege to Stirling Castle. Again, this was another of the largest and most difficult castles to take in all the country. Since the days when King Edward I had battered it with his terrible trebuchet Warwolf, this strategic mountainside fortress had remained in English hands, but the Scots were determined to recover it. A few months dragged by, and both English food and spirits began to falter within the stone walls. At last their commander, Philip de Mowbray, asked to have a parley with Edward Bruce. He promised that if he should receive no help by the 24th of June, that he would surrender the castle to the Scots. Now, King Edward II had already been planning his invasion, you may remember, but when he received news of Mowbray's promise, all other business was put on hold, and his focus turned entirely to the war in the north. Stirling Castle was one of the last threads which the English grasped of Scotland. To let it slip would be to practically lose all. The army of 15,000 which the king had desired swelled to a full 20,000 more. And with the royal standard of the Three Lions billowing in the wind, they at last came to the River Tweed. 8 years after the Battle of Methven, the English had officially returned.